I'm a really big fan of knives, from a cheap little Swiss Army knife like this one that you can pick up for around 20 bucks, all the way to more premium offerings like this ProTech SBR that's around the $200 mark. Yet my personal preference kind of has to fall somewhere in the middle. I really gravitate towards budget focused knives, mainly around the $50 to $80 price range, and I feel like that's kind of the sweet spot. And in this range, the competition is insanely fierce, and you can end up with a really remarkable knife for the price. You have brands like Kaiser, Civivi, Vosteed, Kershaw, and countless others really putting out really incredible knives with really great materials like micarta, G10, even the occasional titanium with blade steels of 154 cm, Nitro V, and 14C28N, all at really affordable and attainable prices. So where am I going with all this? Well, I think I discovered another really solid choice to enter the arena. Featuring a price right under the $60 mark, this brings micarta scales, a 14C28N blade, a crossbar lock with honestly really surprising action, but there are a few drawbacks here that are unfortunately a little bit of an annoyance, but in the grand scheme of things, this might be one of the best budget knives out there. But is it all too good to be true? Let's find out. So some background. This is coming from a brand new brand called Vicino, and I believe this is their very first model to be released. And to be honest, it was kind of hard actually finding much about them at all online. On their website, they have an About Us page. It was kind of generic and just kind of mentions that their manufacturing partner has been in the knife industry for over 30 years, but doesn't mention any names, so your guess is as good as mine. These knives are made in China, so you can kind of start to think of the common hitters over there. And even though this is a relatively unknown brand, they kind of hit a home run at their first at bat, but there might be a reason for this that I'll cover later on that's a little bit controversial. On the surface, this knife at this price point is just a really strong contender for a really great value folder. For under the $60 price tag, this features all the common materials we've really kind of grown to love at this price point. We have nice, grippy, textured micarta scales, which come in either green like this one, a black, or a blue variant. And these micarta scales have actually a milled appearance, and though it's a little bit hard to see, you can actually feel it in hand, and it adds some additional grip, and it kind of separates this from just a blank slab of micarta, which I really like. Now moving on to the blade, we have a 3.03 inch drop point blade of, take a guess, 14C28N, which has come as no surprise, as almost every single knife under the $80 mark is kind of rocking this steel at the moment. But that's not a slight, as this steel performs really well, it's tough, it's corrosion resistant, and it's fairly easy to touch up and sharpen. And on the topic of the blade, this lacks really any branding other than a very small word mark here at the bottom, kind of near the pivot. And I think this makes it look so much more cleaner and more premium, so I really love to see that. And this blade also has a little distressed stonewash finish, which should help hide scratches and wear, which on a knife like this is just perfect because this knife will definitely get some use for me. I tend to beat up on my budget knives like this a little bit more with my more expensive knives, of course. So having a tough working finish like this will just continue to look better longer, so I love seeing it here. Rounding out the rest of the knife, this comes with a really nice deep carry pocket clip that is reversible, and it comes with inset flush screws, so no chance of hanging up or destroying your pocket, and it carries really well. Now I can't talk about this knife and not talk about the crossbar lock here in the action, because I know you're probably dying to know. Some brands can really get a crossbar lock down perfectly like Kaiser. There's been some others that try and just don't get it quite right. I'm happy to say, though not as smooth as Kaiser, this one is done exceptionally well and is really smooth once broken in. Removing it from the box, it was a little bit gritty and rough, but after flicking it open and closed a few hundred times at my desk, it's smoothened out over time and now feels so much more enjoyable. I'm not going to say this is the smoothest action I've ever felt, but it's still really smooth and fluid, especially considering the price. This might be the best action on a crossbar lock, probably under the $70 mark if I had to pass out an award here. The thumb studs work really great to fire the blade out, and the crossbar lock works every time to bring the blade slamming shut. Crossbar locks are my favorite opening and locking mechanism, and this one's no different. I love being able to keep my hands out of the blade's path, and more importantly, it's just really fun to fidget with. I do have one criticism here though, it's the type of head of the screw they use on this crossbar lock. I'm not sure how good my camera work will be to kind of pick this up, but the head of this screw, the edges are just kind of sharp and it really kind of tears up your thumb. It's definitely uncomfortable. And should you find yourself constantly flicking this knife open and closed, your thumb will definitely feel it and it'll be a little bit sore. I wish this edge was just knocked down a little bit, as this edge is just too sharp at the moment and unfortunately kind of hampers my enjoyment with the action that's otherwise really good. Now I feel like this is a really great knife, especially for the price, but it's not perfect. There are just a few things that leave me a little bit disappointed that would otherwise make this probably the perfect budget knife. I just kind of feel like the fit and finish here just kind of misses the mark just a little bit. When you handle a premium knife, you almost feel it immediately. On here, there's just a few little things I feel like they can kind of be improved on. First, there's the sharp edges on the crossbar lock that dig into your thumb that I mentioned earlier. Then there's actually another small issue with the lanyard hole and the edges of the handle. Much like the crossbar lock studs that were too sharp, the edges of this handle, especially down by the lanyard hole, are just sharp and kind of cut in your palm when you go to close the blade. This is almost going to be impossible to show on camera, so it's just a thing you have to trust me on. When you rub your finger here down by the lanyard hole, it's just a little bit sharp, especially down by this corner edge, and it can just sometimes dig into the palm, and again, just really isn't that pleasant. I don't want to sound like every edge is cutting into your hand, but there's just a few little problem areas that I think could be improved on version 2. Outside of those little nitpicks, this is a really fantastic knife. My card is really nice and grippy, especially with this milled pattern. The pocket clip is deep carry, reversible, and features inset screws that make it a really easy knife to carry and just toss in the pocket. The blade steel here choice is also solid. I really love the look of just a clean blade. The action's really smooth, and the lockup is extremely solid, absolutely zero play. So for 60 bucks, you're getting a really solid performing knife here that would serve you perfectly. This knife right now has a retail cost of $59 at the time of this recording. And that kind of puts it in range with some really strong competition out there. So how does it stack up? Well, honestly, just looking at the materials here and the action, I think pretty well. I don't think it blows the competition out of the water, as it's not much lower cost than others, but it's still a really great buy if you like the look of this knife. But on the topic of looks, does this knife look familiar to you guys at all? What about now? I don't know if it's just me, but I think this looks very, very similar to the Voss Raccoon. I know there's only so many ways to make a knife, but this one looks very inspired by it. We even have the same green micarta scales, and funny enough, even the same yellow thumb studs with these green scales. Now, I'm not saying this is a clone or a direct copy by any means, but just kind of interesting how similar they look. When doing research about this, I noticed they actually have the exact same price at $59, at least on Amazon at the moment. So for me personally, I think I would probably lean more towards the Raccoon, as that's a bigger company with a more established presence, but I'm sure you can't go wrong with either choice. This is still a really great knife, and looking at its possible inspiration, I think it's easy to see why. So at the end of the day, this is another really solid entry into the budget knife category. Is this the ultimate winner in this territory though? Probably not, as it doesn't do anything much different than those around it, and it comes in at the exact same price point. But for what it is, a folding knife under 60 bucks with a 14C 28N and a really snappy crossbar lock, I think it's a really great deal. Heck, even a couple of years ago, a knife like this would have put you back closer to $80 to $100. So just seeing something like this now under $60, it just shows you how fast the knife industry is moving and how good of a knife you can now get for honestly not a lot of money. So now I want to hear from you guys. What do you think of this knife? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.